Transfer the settlement into the new joint trust by Thursday, or I'm packing my bags. She didn't blink when she said it. She just took a slow sip of her coffee, set the mug down on the quartz countertop, and looked at me like I was a stranger who had accidentally wandered into her kitchen. The wire transfer had cleared exactly 6 days ago. $1.2 million. It sounds like lottery money until you realize what it cost to get it. 3 years ago, I walked into a hospital for what was supposed to be a standard L4-L5 spinal fusion. I woke up with permanent nerve damage. For the first 18 months, it felt like someone had buried a hot soldering iron in my lower back, leaving a live wire running all the way down my left leg. I lost my job. I lost my mobility. I spent entire weeks lying flat on the living room rug because the bed was too soft and the couch was too deep. Chloe and I had been married for 8 years. For the first year of my recovery, she was the supportive wife. She drove me to physical therapy, managed my pain medication schedule, and dealt with the insurance companies. But chronic pain is a quiet, ugly thing. It doesn't heal like a broken arm. It just lingers, grinding down everything around it. Around year 2, the pity turned to exhaustion. By year 3, it had calcified into resentment. She stopped asking how I was feeling. She started taking more shifts at the marketing firm. She joined a boutique fitness club and started coming home late, smelling of eucalyptus body wash and expensive smoothies. And then we won the malpractice suit. The absolute second the funds landed in my soul's separate account, the frost melted. For 4 days, she was the woman I married again. She bought expensive steaks. She poured wine. She touched my shoulder when she walked past me. Then came Sunday brunch at the kitchen island, and the thick stack of legal documents she pushed across the marble. We need to protect these assets from future liability, she announced, her voice adopting that crisp, professional tone she usually reserved for client pitches. My colleague's husband, Owen Ashby, is an estate attorney. He drew up an irrevocable joint trust for us. It's bulletproof. It protects the money from creditors, from taxes, from everything. I looked down at the documents. The paper was heavy, expensive. There were little yellow sticky arrows pointing to the signature lines. I need to have my lawyer review this first, I told her gently. Garrett handled the malpractice suit. He knows my financial situation. Her eyes narrowed. The warmth vanished from her face so fast it gave me whiplash. Review what? We are a team. Why are you suddenly treating me like an adversary? It's a massive sum of money, Chloe. I just want to be smart about our future. She shoved her chair back so hard the wooden legs shrieked against the hardwood floor. You have until Thursday at 5 p.m. to sign those papers and fund the trust. If you don't, I am contacting a divorce lawyer. I refuse to share a life with a man who views me as a threat. She didn't wait for me to answer. That afternoon, she packed a leather weekender bag, threw it in the trunk of her Audi, and drove out to her sister Claire's house in Naperville. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Chloe had updated her Facebook status. Trust is the foundation of love. Without it, you have nothing. My stomach tied itself into a cold, heavy knot. I sat at the kitchen island for a long time, staring at the empty house. My back was throbbing, a dull, rhythmic ache that meant I had been sitting upright for too long, but I didn't move. Something was fundamentally wrong. Chloe had literally never cared about our financial structuring before. For 8 years, I managed the bills, the taxes, the investments. She didn't even know the login to our shared checking account. She hated paperwork. The sudden, aggressive push for an irrevocable trust, completely bypassing my own legal counsel, sent alarm bells ringing through my head. I didn't hire a private investigator. I didn't need to. I am a network engineer by trade. When my mobility was at its worst, I spent my days upgrading our home network just to keep my mind occupied. I installed a massive Synology 4-bay network-attached storage server in the hall closet. Every device in the house backed up to it automatically in the background. On Tuesday morning at 10:15 a.m., I was running routine maintenance on the server. Chloe had traded in her old MacBook for a newer model a few months prior. She had wiped the old laptop clean before selling it, but she completely forgot that her local files automatically synced to a hidden partition on the home server. The archive was still sitting there, untouched. I opened her directory just to clear out old storage space. That's when I saw a folder mysteriously labeled Dubai Venture. I clicked it. Inside was an absolute goldmine of devastation. There were hundreds of exported WhatsApp chat logs, a 50-page business prospectus, and a series of PDF bank applications. My hands felt cold as I opened the first chat transcript. The messages were between Chloe and a man named Marcus Whitfield. Marcus wasn't a financial advisor. He was her personal trainer at the boutique gym she had joined last year. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a corporate structure to launder my suffering. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor burning my eyes, and read months of their conversations. It was like reading a script written by two sociopaths. Marcus, Doc 12. How's the cripple today? Chloe, Doc 12. Complaining. Again, he took another pain pill at breakfast. I can't stand the way he breathes when he's medicated. It's pathetic. Marcus, just focus on the finish line, babe. Trial is almost over. Did you talk to Owen yet? Chloe, yes. Owen is drafting the trust. He thinks we're just doing standard asset protection. I kept scrolling. The room felt entirely devoid of oxygen. Chloe, 14. The trust is practically set up, babe. Once his payout drops, the trust transfers the capital into our offshore LLC as an investment vehicle. By the time he realizes the money is moved, we'll already be closing on the penthouse in the Marina District. Marcus, God, you're brilliant. I've got the LLC paperwork ready on my end, just waiting on the seed money. She was going to drain the irrevocable trust through a shell company. An irrevocable trust meant that once I signed the money over, I gave up unilateral control. By naming herself as a co-trustee with specific executive powers, she could approve an investment into Marcus's fake LLC. The money would vanish overseas, leaving me completely penniless and physically broken, while she disappeared to the United Arab Emirates with her gym rat. I opened a new tab and ran a basic public records search on Marcus Whitfield. It took less than 10 minutes to find out exactly who she was leaving me for. Marcus had a trail of shattered LLCs in 2 different states. He had a massive outstanding ears tax lien for unpaid self-employment taxes, and 3 separate small claims judgments against him from former clients who claimed he took upfront payments for training packages and never delivered. He wasn't just a parasite, he was a broke parasite, and Chloe was about to hand him the only safety net I had for the rest of my life. I spent Wednesday in absolute silence. I didn't call her, I didn't text her. I printed everything, every chat log, every business prospectus, every public record of Marcus's tax liens. I placed them in a neat manila folder. Then, I drove into the city to see my attorney, Garrett Mercer. Garrett took one look at the trust document Owen Ashby had drafted, and his face turned grim. "This is a loaded gun," Garrett said, tossing the document onto his desk. "If you sign this, she has the authority to move assets for diversification purposes without your secondary signature. Once it's in a foreign corporate account, getting it back would take years of international litigation, assuming you could even afford to pay me to track it down, which you couldn't, because your money would be gone. I have the proof, Garrett," I said, sliding the manila folder across his desk. He opened it. He read the chat logs. He read the name she called me crippled ATM. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just closed the folder, took off his glasses, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Do not sign the trust," Garrett said quietly. "Let her initiate the divorce. Because this settlement was awarded strictly for personal injury, pain, and suffering, it is entirely exempt from marital assets in this state. It's yours. She has zero legal claim to it in a standard divorce proceeding. She knows that. That's why she's trying to trick you into commingling it in the trust." "I know," I said. Thursday evening arrived. Her deadline. I sat at the dining room table. The laptop was open in front of me, the screen displaying the Dubai Venture folder. The printed dossier on Marcus was stacked neatly to my right. Chloe walked through the front door at exactly 4:45 p.m. She dropped her keys on the console table with a sharp clatter. She was wearing a tailored trench coat, her hair perfectly blown out. She looked incredibly smug. She walked into the dining room, her heels clicking aggressively against the wood. "So?" she asked, crossing her arms. "Did you sign the paperwork, or am I calling my attorney?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I think Marcus might need to find another investor," I said softly. The color drained from her cheeks so fast she looked physically ill. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a hollow, wide-eyed terror. "What did you just say?" Her voice was barely a whisper. I pushed the laptop toward her. The screen was open to the chat log from October 12th. "You hacked my computer," she breathed, taking a step back. "You invaded my privacy. You left your synced files on my server, Chloe. You were going to wash my settlement money through a fake offshore company and abandon me." She frantically tried to justify it. The panic made her sloppy. That's not what it looks like. You're taking it out of context. The messages, they were just a fantasy. It was a stupid roleplay game I played to blow off steam, because I was so stressed out taking care of you. I picked up the printed dossier of Marcus's tax liens and fraud allegations and dropped it on top of the laptop keyboard. "Your fantasy boyfriend owes the ears 40 grand, I said, "and you were going to hand him $1 million of my blood money." When she saw the financial records, the desperate backpedaling stopped. The panic gave way to a vicious, unhinged venom. Her face contorted into something ugly and unrecognizable. "You think I want to spend my prime years playing nurse to a guy with a bad back?" she screamed, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "I wasted my 20s on you. I wiped you down when you couldn't get out of the tub. I earned that payout just as much as you did for putting up with your miserable, depressing recovery." She grabbed her weekender bag from by the door and stormed out. I listened to the Audi's engine rev aggressively in the driveway before she sped off. She assumed she could still fight me for half the settlement in standard divorce proceedings. She assumed she could drag me through the mud, hire a bulldog lawyer, and force a settlement. I locked the front door, turned off the lights, and finally let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 3 days. My back ached, but the house was quiet, peaceful. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and went to bed. The next morning, I woke up early. I needed to pick up a refill of my nerve medication from the pharmacy. I drove the 5 miles into town, handed the pharmacist my prescription, and swiped my debit card at the register. The machine beeped. Declined. I frowned. "Can you run it again? That's a joint checking account. There should be plenty in there." The pharmacist ran it again. Same result. I stepped aside, pulling out my phone to open my banking app. I logged in, expecting to see the usual balance we kept for household expenses and mortgages. The balance was cents. A withdrawal of $42,500 had been executed at 8:00 a.m., transferred directly to an external account I didn't recognize. Before I could even process what I was looking at, my phone vibrated in my hand. It was Garrett. "Where are you?" Garrett asked, his voice tight. "At the pharmacy," I said. "Garrett." She emptied the joint checking account, every dime of our shared liquid cash. "It's worse than that," Garrett said over the line, the rustle of papers echoing in his office. "I just got served by courier. She hired Dana Voss. Do you know who that is? No. Dana Voss is the most ruthless family litigator in the county. Chloe isn't filing for a standard divorce. She's filed an emergency ex parte petition this morning. She's claiming that your prolonged use of opioid painkillers and nerve medication has resulted in severe cognitive decline. She's petitioning the court for emergency medical guardianship over you. I froze in the aisle of the pharmacy. The fluorescent lights overhead suddenly felt blinding. Guardianship? She's telling a judge you aren't mentally competent to manage your own finances or medical care, Garrett said, his tone dead serious. She's asking the court to freeze the $1.2 million settlement account immediately, pending a psychological evaluation. If she gets guardianship, she doesn't need you to sign the trust. She can sign it for you. I lowered the phone from my ear. The pharmacist was still standing there, holding the small white paper bag with my prescription, looking at me with a mixture of polite impatience and pity. Sir, he asked, do you have another card? No, I said, my voice sounding hollow, like it was coming from someone else. I'll have to come back for it. I walked out of the pharmacy and into the blinding morning sun. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process the sheer scale of what she had just done. Chloe hadn't just taken the 42 grand from our checking account. That was just pocket change to keep her comfortable at her sister's house. The real prize was the settlement, and she had just found a legal backdoor to bypass my signature completely. I didn't go home. I put the car in drive and headed straight to Garrett's office downtown. When I walked into his reception area, his paralegal didn't even ask me to sit down. She just nodded toward his closed door. I walked in. Garrett was standing by the window, his suit jacket off, aggressively loosening his tie. His desk was covered in paper. Sit, he said, pointing to the leather chair opposite him. How does a judge grant guardianship without even talking to me? I asked, my voice finally finding its anger. How is that legal? Garrett sat down heavily. It's an ex parte emergency motion. It means she filed it unilaterally, claiming there was an immediate severe risk to your safety or your assets if you were notified beforehand. Voss is a shark. She knows exactly what judges in this county are terrified of. She didn't paint you as an angry husband. She painted you as a tragic, drug-addled victim who is rapidly deteriorating. Garrett slid a thick, stapled packet of court documents across the desk. I flipped to the second page. It was an affidavit signed by Chloe, sworn under penalty of perjury. I read the paragraphs, my stomach turning to lead. Chloe had meticulously documented every single pill I had taken over the last 3 years. She listed the oxycodone from the immediate post-op period, the gabapentin, the muscle relaxers. She had taken photos of my pill bottles. She detailed the days I couldn't get off the floor, twisting my physical disability into a narrative of profound cognitive decline. She claimed I was suffering from paranoia, hallucinating that she was stealing from me, and that I was dangerously close to wiring the malpractice funds to scammers. She's using the Dubai Venture server files, I said, putting the paper down. I confronted her about the offshore LLC yesterday. Now she's telling the court that the whole thing is a paranoid delusion I made up because of the medication. Exactly, Garrett said, leaning forward. She's preemptively discrediting your evidence. If you walk into court and start shouting about how your personal trainer wife is trying to launder $1 million to Dubai, and she points to this affidavit saying, see, Your Honor, the paranoia is escalating. The judge is going to look at your medical history and freeze the account permanently just to be safe. The account is already frozen? Temporarily, Garrett clarified. The bank put a hard hold on the $1.2 million at 9:00 a.m. Neither you nor she can touch it. We have a preliminary hearing set for Tuesday morning. That gives us 4 days to prove you are entirely of sound mind, and that this petition is a malicious, fraudulent attempt to hijack separate, non-marital assets. How much is this going to cost? I asked, the reality of my empty checking account suddenly crashing down on me. Garrett, I can't even pay you a retainer right now. She drained the joint account. I couldn't even buy my medication this morning. Garrett waved a hand dismissively. We've been fighting together for 3 years. I know you're good for it, and quite frankly, Dana Voss pisses me off. But the medication issue is a problem. You need a doctor to evaluate you today and put it on the record that your cognitive function is perfect. My primary care doctor is on vacation, I said, rubbing my temples. The dull ache in my lower back was starting to flare up again, a sharp reminder that I had skipped my morning dose. Then we go to a private forensic psychiatrist, Garrett said, pulling a business card from his drawer. Dr. Eris Thorne. He testifies in competency hearings all the time. He's sharp, he's credible, and he doesn't take bullshit. I already called him. He can squeeze you in at 4 p.m. today. It's going to be a grueling interview, but if he clears you, we have our shield against Voss. I took the card. And what about the Dubai files? The WhatsApp chats? The LLC paperwork? Go home. Print everything again. But more importantly, back up that entire hidden partition to 3 separate external hard drives. Put one in a safety deposit box. Bring one to me, and hide the third. If Voss is smart, and she is, her next move will be an emergency order to confiscate your electronic devices under the guise of protecting your digital assets from your drug-induced manic spending. We need that data secured before a court order locks you out of your own server. I left Garrett's office with a very clear, very terrifying to-do list. The drive back to my house felt different. The neighborhood looked the same. The lawns were perfectly manicured, but the safety of my own life had evaporated. I was entirely vulnerable. I had no money, a frozen settlement, and a wife who was actively trying to legally erase my autonomy. I pulled into my driveway. Chloe's Audi was gone. The house was quiet. I unlocked the front door and walked straight to the hall closet. I opened it and reached for the top shelf where the Synology NAS server hummed quietly in the dark. I needed to run the backups immediately. My hand hit empty air. I froze. I dragged over a dining room chair, stepped onto it, and looked over the top shelf. The dust outlines were still there. The power cable was dangling uselessly against the drywall. The Ethernet cord had been snapped at the clip, left hanging from the wall port. The server was gone. I stepped down from the chair, the silence of the house suddenly roaring in my ears. I ran to the home office. My laptop was missing from the desk. I checked the drawer where I kept the printed manila folder of Marcus's tax liens and the chat logs. Empty. She hadn't just filed for guardianship. She had used the time I spent at the pharmacy in Garrett's office to come back, strip the house of every piece of digital and physical evidence, and vanish. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. I told you we were a team. You should have just signed the trust. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to reply, to type out a string of vicious expletives, to tell her I knew exactly what she was doing. But Garrett's voice echoed in my head. She's painting you as a tragic, drug-addled victim. The paranoia is escalating. If I replied to that text with anger, she would screenshot it. She would crop out her provocation and show a judge my unhinged, aggressive response. She wanted me to act crazy. She needed me to act crazy. I didn't reply. I swiped left and deleted the thread. I looked back at the empty shelf in the closet. The severed Ethernet cable dangled against the drywall like a dead snake. Chloe had taken the Synology NAS and my laptop. She probably thought she was pulling off the perfect crime, stripping the house of the evidence that proved her Dubai scheme. She was a marketing director. She understood optics, brand management, and spin. She didn't understand infrastructure. She thought data was physical. She thought because she had the metal box with the blinking lights, she had the files. But she didn't know I had set up an automated cron job to push an encrypted mirror of the entire NAS to a Backblaze B2 cloud storage bucket every morning at 3 a.m. The problem wasn't the data. The problem was access. My phone was secure, but I couldn't download and decrypt a 50-gigabyte archive on an iPhone. I needed a terminal. I needed a computer. And my debit card was a piece of useless plastic. I drove to the public library on 4th Street. My back was in absolute agony. I had missed my morning dose of gabapentin, and the nerve pain was wrapping around my left hip like a barbed wire tourniquet. Every bump in the road made me grit my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I parked, walked through the automatic sliding doors, and made my way to the public computer lab. I sat down at a sticky keyboard in a hard plastic chair that offered zero lumbar support. To my left, a teenager was watching loudly dubbed anime. To my right, an elderly man was scrolling through Facebook. I logged into my encrypted cloud portal. It took 45 minutes to pull down the specific Delta backup from Tuesday night. My hands were sweating on the plastic mouse. If Chloe had somehow managed to access my master password vault on the stolen laptop and wipe the cloud bucket, I was genuinely finished. But she hadn't. The directory loaded. Dubai Venture. It was all still there. I didn't just print it this time. I forwarded the entire unencrypted folder via a secure file transfer link directly to Garrett's private email. I added a note, cloud backup secured. Print this and lock it down. I logged out, cleared the browser cache, and stood up. I was dizzy from the pain. It was 3:15 p.m. I had 45 minutes to get to Dr. Thorne's office and prove to a forensic psychiatrist that my brain wasn't melting from opioid abuse. Dr. Eris Thorne's office was in a sterile gray medical plaza on the edge of the city. There were no soothing ocean sounds in the waiting room, no plush couches, just hard chairs and outdated magazines. Thorne himself looked like a man who hadn't smiled since the late 90s. He was in his 50s, wearing a sharp charcoal cardigan and wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't offer a warm greeting when he called me back. He just gestured to a leather armchair opposite his desk. "I'll be direct, Doctor," Thorne said, opening a manila folder that I recognized as the same ex-party packet Garrett had shown me. "Your wife's legal counsel has submitted a sworn affidavit stating that you are experiencing severe cognitive decline, paranoia, and erratic behavior stemming from long-term narcotic dependency. She has petitioned the court for emergency medical and financial guardianship." He looked up, his eyes boring into me. "You look like you're in significant pain right now. When was your last dose of medication?" "Last night at 8 p.m., I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I missed my morning refill because my wife emptied our joint checking account of $42,000 at 8 a.m., and my card declined at the pharmacy." Thorne didn't blink. He just made a small note with a silver pen. "And the paranoia? She states you believe she is involved in an international money laundering scheme." "I don't believe it, Dr. Thorne. I have the corporate prospectus she downloaded, and the WhatsApp chat logs between her and her personal trainer, Marcus Whitfield. They were planning to funnel my medical malpractice settlement through a shell LLC in Dubai using an irrevocable joint trust." "That sounds like the plot of a bad movie," Thorne noted dryly. "It does," I agreed, "which is exactly why her lawyer is using it to paint me as delusional. If I walked in here shouting about offshore accounts, I'd sound insane. But I emailed the primary source documents to my attorney 20 minutes ago. I'm not here to ask you to believe my story. I'm here to ask you to evaluate my cognitive function function, my memory recall, and my grip on reality. For the next 2 hours, Thorne put me through an absolute grinder. He administered the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He gave me a list of random words and asked me to recall them 20 minutes later, while interrogating me about the timeline of my spinal surgery. He asked probing, deeply uncomfortable questions about my marriage, looking for any sign of displaced anger or emotional instability. My back was screaming. My leg felt like it was on fire. I wanted to crawl out of my skin, but I sat perfectly still. I answered every question calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't disparage Chloe. I stuck entirely to the facts. When the clock hit 5:30 p.m., Thorne finally put his pen down. He closed the folder. "Your wife painted a picture of a man who is lost in a pharmaceutical fog," Thorne said quietly. "You are clearly in acute physical distress, but your executive functioning is flawless. You are oriented, articulate, and completely lucid. Will you testify to that on Tuesday?" I asked. "I will submit a sworn psychological evaluation to the court by Monday morning," Thorne said. "I do not believe you meet the criteria for emergency guardianship. What you do with your money is your business." I thanked him, walked out to my car, and nearly collapsed against the door handle. The adrenaline was fading, leaving nothing but the crushing reality of my physical pain. I drove home in silence. The house was freezing. Chloe must have turned the thermostat down before she left, a petty parting gift. I walked into the kitchen and opened the pantry. We had half a box of dry pasta, a jar of marinara sauce, and some stale crackers. I hadn't eaten since yesterday. I boiled water, cooked the pasta, and ate it standing over the sink. I needed my medication. The withdrawal from the gabapentin was starting to make my hands shake. I had to get through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday before I could even stand in front of a judge and ask for my assets to be unfrozen. The doorbell rang. I froze, the fork halfway to my mouth. It was 8 p.m. I walked to the front window and peered through the blinds. It wasn't Chloe. It was a silver Toyota RAV4 parked in the driveway. A woman was standing on the porch, wrapped in a heavy wool coat, looking incredibly uncomfortable. It was Claire, Chloe's older sister. I opened the front door. Claire looked at me, her eyes darting nervously to my hands, then to my face. She looked like she was expecting me to start throwing things. "Claire," I said, "what are you doing here?" I brought some of your things," she said, her voice tight. She pointed to a cardboard box sitting by her feet on the porch mat. "Chloe asked me to drop them off. She didn't feel safe coming back here." I looked at the box. Inside were some of my older clothes, a few books, and my electric razor. "She doesn't feel safe," I repeated flatly. "Look, I don't want to be in the middle of this," Claire said, crossing her arms tightly against the cold. "Chloe is a mess. She showed up at my house in tears yesterday. She told me about the pills. She told me about the hallucinations. I'm really sorry you're going through this, but you need help." I stared at my sister-in-law. I had known Claire for 10 years. We had spent Thanksgivings together. I had helped her fix the transmission on that exact Toyota in my driveway. Chloe hadn't just filed a legal motion. She was aggressively salting the earth of my entire social and family support system, poisoning everyone against me before I even knew I was in a fight. "Did she tell you about Marcus?" I asked softly. Claire frowned, a genuine look of confusion crossing her face. "Marcus? Her trainer from the gym?" "Yeah, her trainer. She said he was helping her put together a physical therapy routine for you," Claire said, her tone defensive. "Because you wouldn't get off the couch." I let out a harsh, dry laugh. It just slipped out. "A physical therapy routine. Right, don't do that," Claire snapped, her empathy evaporating. "Don't act like she's the villain here. She has sacrificed her entire life for you for the last 3 years. She is exhausted, and now you're making up these insane stories and refusing to protect the settlement money. She had to take over, for your own good. Claire, she drained my checking account this morning. I have $0. I couldn't even pick up my nerve medication today. If you want to talk about my own good, ask yourself why a woman who is terrified of her erratic husband's spending habits stole 40 grand in cash and then filed legal paperwork to lock him out of $1 million injury settlement." Claire hesitated. A tiny fracture of doubt appeared in her eyes. Chloe was a good liar, but Claire wasn't stupid. The math was aggressive, even for a concerned spouse. "She said you were trying to wire it to scammers," Claire said, though her voice lacked its previous conviction. "I haven't wired a dime to anyone, but if you want to know the truth, ask her to show you the laptop she stole from my hall closet today. Ask her to open the folder labeled Dubai Venture. See if she lets you." "She didn't steal a laptop," Claire said slowly. "She brought a silver hard drive thing to my house. She said it was her work server. It's a Synology NAS," I said. "It belongs to me. It has the evidence on it." Claire stared at me for a long time. The freezing wind whipped across the porch, rattling the dead leaves in the gutters. She looked at the cardboard box at my feet, then back up at my face. She could see the sweat on my forehead. She could see the slight tremor in my jaw from the pain. She didn't say anything else. She turned around, walked back to her Toyota, and drove away. I picked up the box, brought it inside, and locked the door. I dug through the clothes, wondering why Chloe had bothered to send this over. It was mostly junk, old t-shirts, a pair of jeans that no longer fit. Then my hand brushed against something hard at the bottom of the box. I pulled it out. It was my prescription bottle of gabapentin, the one I was supposed to pick up this morning. The label had my name on it, dated today. Chloe had picked it up from the pharmacy before I got there. She had paid for it in cash, kept it all day, and then sent it back to me in a box of garbage via her sister. There was a small yellow sticky note attached to the cap. "See? I always take care of you." I stared at the bottle. bottle, a cold wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a demonstration of absolute power. She was showing me that she controlled my access to everything: my money, my reputation, my data, and even my physical relief. She wanted me to take the pills. She wanted me sedated and compliant by the time Tuesday rolled around. I peeled the sticky note off, opened the bottle, and swallowed my dosage dry. I didn't care about her power play. I needed my head clear and my body functional. Friday morning, I woke up on the living room rug. The medication had taken the edge off, allowing me a few hours of unbroken sleep. I went to the kitchen and booted up my phone. I had 3 missed calls from Garrett. I called him back immediately. "Did you get the files from the cloud?" I asked. "I got them," Garrett said, his voice clipped and all business. "I spent the last 4 hours reading through these WhatsApp logs. It's worse than you thought. They weren't just going to move the money. They've been structuring the LLC to absorb the tax liability and dump it back onto you as the primary grantor of the trust. If she pulled this off, you wouldn't just be broke. You'd owe the Ayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties." I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. "Can we use it? Can we show it to the judge on Tuesday to blow up the guardianship motion?" "Yes," Garrett said, "but we have a new problem. A massive one." "What?" "Dana Voss just filed an addendum to the ex parte motion at 8 a.m., Garrett said, and I could hear the frustration radiating through the phone. "She isn't just relying on your medical history anymore. She found something else. She submitted a police report to the judge." "A police report? I haven't done anything." "Not you," Garrett said. "Marcus Whitfield. Last night, someone vandalized his car, smashed the windshield, slashed all 4 tires, and spray painted a threatening message on the hood. He filed a police report claiming it was you. He told the cops you're a deranged, jealous husband who has been stalking him. Chloe submitted his police report as proof that your paranoia has escalated into violent physical retaliation." I couldn't breathe. The kitchen walls felt like they were closing in. "Garrett, I was at Dr. Thorne's office until 5:30, and then I was at home all night. Claire came over at 8 p.m. I didn't touch his car. I don't even know where he lives." "I know you didn't do it," Garrett said grimly, "because Marcus did it to his own car. It's a setup. Voss and Chloe knew the medical records might not be enough to freeze the money permanently, so they engineered a physical threat to make you look unhinged and dangerous. Will the judge believe it? With the affidavit, the medical history, and now a police report for violent vandalism, a conservative family court judge will absolutely err on the side of caution. If they grant full guardianship on Tuesday, she gets the $1 million, she signs the trust, and it's over." Garrett paused, taking a heavy breath. "We need an alibi for last night, tight as a drum, and we need to find a way to prove Marcus staged the vandalism, because right now, on paper, you look exactly like the monster they say you are." "What time exactly does the police report claim this happened?" I asked, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Garrett paused. I heard the rough slide of paper as he flipped through the addendum. Marcus stated he parked his car in his apartment complex lot at 6:30 p.m. He came out at 9:15 p.m. to go to the gym and found the damage. The report says all 4 tires were slashed, the windshield was smashed with a heavy blunt object, and the word "dead" was spray painted across the hood. "I was home," I said, my voice tight. "I left Thorne's office at 5:30. I drove straight here. I cooked pasta. Claire came over at 8 p.m. Claire is Chloe's sister," Garrett reminded me sharply. "If Dana Voss puts her on the witness stand, do you really think she's going to testify that you were sitting peacefully in your living room? Or is she going to say you were agitated, sweating, and acting erratic? Or worse, she'll just say you weren't home at all." I thought about Claire's face on the porch, the nervous, darting eyes, the fear. Chloe had already planted the seed that I was dangerous and unpredictable. Claire was primed to see exactly what Chloe wanted her to see. "I have exterior security cameras," I said. "High-def POE cameras covering the driveway and the street." "Perfect," Garrett said, his voice lifting slightly. "Pull the footage. Send it to me right now." "I can't. They record directly to the local storage on the Synology NAS server, the one Chloe stole yesterday afternoon. The B2 cloud backup I pulled from the library only captured data up to Wednesday night. Thursday's camera footage was still sitting on the local drives when she ripped the box out of the wall." Garrett cursed under his breath. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "She didn't just take the server to hide the Dubai files. She took it to erase your alibi. She's a marketing director, Garrett. She doesn't know how to meticulously plan a staged crime and strategically wipe a local surveillance server. No, but Marcus does. He's a seasoned fraudster. He told her exactly what to take." A heavy knock hammered on my front door. I jumped, dropping the phone onto the quartz counter. It clattered loudly. "Hold on," I told Garrett, snatching it back up. The knock came again. Louder, authoritative. I walked to the front window in the living room and parted the plastic blinds with 2 fingers. A black and white county sheriff's cruiser was parked in my driveway, right where Claire's Toyota had been the night before. 2 deputies were standing on my porch. The older one had his hand resting casually on his utility belt. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold spike of pure adrenaline shooting down my spine. "Garrett," I whispered, "the cops are at my door. Do not let them in," Garrett commanded instantly, his voice dropping into a rapid, clinical cadence. "They are doing a wellness check. Voss requested it. It's a standard, dirty tactic in guardianship disputes to establish a baseline of erratic living conditions. Step outside, close the door behind you, be polite, be calm, and give them absolutely nothing." I hung up the phone and shoved it into the pocket of my sweatpants. I took a deep breath, trying trying to force my heart rate down. I opened the front door and immediately stepped out onto the porch, pulling the heavy wooden door shut until the deadbolt latch clicked firmly behind me. The morning air was freezing. I was only wearing a thin t-shirt. "Good morning," I said, keeping my tone steady and pleasant. The older deputy, a thick-necked man with a graying mustache, looked me up and down. He took in the sweatpants, my bare feet on the freezing concrete, and the tight, pain-stiffened posture I couldn't completely hide. "Sir, we received a call requesting a welfare check at this address," the deputy said, his tone perfectly neutral but his eyes scanning my face for any sign of intoxication. "Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly fine, officer, just getting my morning started. The caller stated you've been experiencing some severe medical episodes and might be a danger to yourself or others," the younger deputy chimed in. He was standing slightly to the side, looking past me, trying to peer through the narrow frosted glass panels of the front door. "Mind if we step inside and take a look around? Make sure everything's okay?" "I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine," I said. "I'm currently under the care of my physician and my attorney. I'd prefer not to have anyone inside the house." The older deputy's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your wife was the one who called, sir. She said you've been off your medication and acting highly paranoid. She also mentioned an incident with a vehicle last night. They weren't just here for a wellness check. They were fishing." Marcus had filed a property damage report in a different jurisdiction, probably the city police, since he lived downtown. "The county sheriffs were here to see if I looked like a guy who spent his Thursday night aggressively smashing windshields with a baseball bat. My wife and I are currently involved in a very contentious legal dispute over financial assets," I said, reciting Garrett's exact phrasing. "She filed an emergency legal motion yesterday, and this welfare check is part of her counsel's litigation strategy. I was evaluated by a forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Eris Thorne, yesterday afternoon at 4 p.m., who cleared me of any cognitive or behavioral issues. You are welcome to contact his office to verify." The older deputy pulled a small spiral-bound notepad from his breast pocket and clicked a pen. "Dr. Eris Thorne?" "Yes," he wrote it down. Then he looked at my bare feet again. "You sure you're okay, sir? You look like you're in a lot of physical pain." "I have chronic nerve damage from a spinal surgery," I said bluntly. "It flares up in the cold, which is why I'd like to go back inside now, if we're finished." The deputies exchanged a look. They didn't have a warrant. They didn't have probable cause. They just had a phone call from a concerned wife. "All right, sir. Have a good day. If you need anything, give us a call." I nodded, turned around, and went back inside. I locked the deadbolt, leaned against the heavy wood, and closed my eyes. My whole body was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of how effortlessly she was manipulating the legal and law enforcement systems. Every move she made was calculated to box me into a corner. I walked back to the kitchen and called Garrett. "They're gone," I said. "They brought up the car." "Of course they did," Garrett said. "You handled it perfectly. The report they file will say you were coherent and polite. Now we go on the offensive. I just sent the Dubai venture files over to a forensic accountant I use. He's going to trace the LLC registration in Delaware back to Marcus to establish the financial link. But we still need an alibi for you, or proof that Marcus wasn't where he said he was." I opened my laptop on the kitchen island. I had the B2 Cloud backup downloaded onto the local drive. I started clicking through the raw files, looking for anything I might have missed in the initial panic. The WhatsApp exports were massive text files. The business prospectus was a bloated PDF. "There has to be something," I muttered, opening a subfolder labeled Asset Structuring. "If Marcus is as sloppy as his tax history suggests, he didn't cover every single track." "Keep looking," Garrett said. "I'm drafting the response motion to Voss's addendum." I opened a file named initial_funding_app.pdf. It was a standard business banking application for the offshore account, filled out with Chloe's name and Marcus's name as co-signers. Standard corporate structuring. I closed it. I opened the master text file of their WhatsApp history. I stared at the endless lines of text, the casual cruelty of their conversations. October 4, had to drop the car at the shop again. Alternator is shot. November 12, can you pick me up? Car won't start. December 3, literally going to drive this piece of shit Honda into the river. I stopped scrolling. I read the last line again. "Garrett," I said slowly. "What? What kind of car did the police report say was vandalized last night?" I heard Garrett shuffling paper on his end. A 2024 BMW M4. Black. I stared at the screen. The kitchen was dead silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. "Garrett," I said softly. "Marcus drives a 10-year-old Honda Accord. He complains about it constantly in these chat logs. He could have bought the BMW recently, or leased it. With what money? He has a $40,000 ears tax lien. He has 3 small claims judgments against him. You can't finance a pack of gum with his credit score, let alone an $80,000 luxury sports car. Then whose car is it?" I opened a new tab on my browser and logged into my banking app. The screen loaded, showing the bleak $2 balance in our joint checking account. I clicked on the recent transactions tab, the one showing the $42,500 withdrawal Chloe had executed at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. "She bought it," I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. "What?" "The 42 grand she took from our joint checking yesterday morning. She didn't just stash it in a private account to starve me out. She used it as a massive cash down payment to bypass his terrible credit score. She bought him the BMW. Wait, if she bought the car yesterday morning," Garrett's voice trailed off. Then he staged a violent vandalism vandalism on a car he hadn't even owned for 12 hours. I finished. They took 40 grand of my money, bought a luxury car, smashed the windows themselves in a parking lot, and blamed it on me to ensure the judge freezes my settlement. Garrett let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but there was zero humor in it. They bought a BMW, he said, his voice dropping an octave. A 2024 M4 retails for over 80 grand. If she used the 42,000 from your account as a down payment to secure the financing for him, then the dealership has her on camera. I said, the fog completely lifting from my brain. They have the bill of sale. They have her signature on the financing documents. And they have the timestamp of when Marcus drove it off the lot. I know the owner of Prestige Motors downtown, Garrett said, his tone shifting from defensive to predatory. They're the only certified M-Series dealer in a 50-mile radius. I'm having my investigator serve them with a preservation letter right now. We're going to get the sales record, the security footage, and the financing application. If she bought him that car yesterday morning, and he filed a police report last night claiming you destroyed it, that isn't just a bad look for family court. It's insurance fraud. It's filing a false police report. And because Chloe submitted that police report to the court this morning as part of her addendum, it is textbook perjury. The weekend was a masterclass in endurance. I stayed in the house. I took my medication exactly as prescribed. I ate canned soup. Every time a car drove past my window, my heart rate spiked, expecting to see a sheriff's cruiser coming back to drag me out in handcuffs. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the quiet, watching the clock tick toward Tuesday morning. Tuesday came. It was raining, a cold, miserable downpour that turned the city gray. I wore a charcoal suit I hadn't put on since before my surgery. It hung loose on my shoulders, a reminder of the muscle mass I had lost lying on my back for 3 years. I walked into the county courthouse with Garrett. My spine burned with every step, but I kept my posture rigidly straight. We walked into courtroom 4B. Chloe was already there, sitting at the petitioner's table next to Dana Voss. Chloe was wearing a conservative navy dress. She had styled her hair to look slightly disheveled, and she was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She was playing the exhausted, terrified wife to perfection. Voss sat next to her, arranging a massive stack of folders with the calm, terrifying precision of an executioner. When Chloe saw me, she shrank back slightly in her chair, a beautifully choreographed flinch for the benefit of the bailiff and the court reporter. I didn't look at her. I sat down next to Garrett. Judge Halvorson took the bench at exactly 9 a.m. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, who looked like she hadn't had a full cup of coffee yet. All right, I've read the emergency ex-party petition and the weekend addendums, Judge Halvorson said, adjusting her glasses. Miss Voss, you are asking this court to strip the respondent of his financial and medical autonomy based on severe cognitive decline, narcotic dependency, and violent paranoia. That is an incredibly high bar. Walk me through it. Dana Voss stood up. For the next 10 minutes, she painted a masterpiece of character assassination. She listed my prescriptions. She quoted my physical inability to leave the house. She held up Chloe's sworn affidavit. And then, for the grand finale, she held up the police report. Your Honor, the respondent's paranoia has escalated into physical violence, Voss said, her voice echoing in the quiet courtroom. He believes his wife is conspiring with a fitness instructor to steal his money. Last night, he tracked down this instructor's vehicle, smashed the windows, slashed the tires, and spray painted a death threat on the hood. He is a danger to the public, to my client, and to himself. The $2 million settlement must remain frozen and placed under my client's guardianship before he wires it to offshore accounts in a delusional panic. Chloe wiped away a tear. Judge Halvorson looked at me, her expression grim. Mr. Mercer, Halvorson said, turning to Garrett, your client is facing some very serious allegations. Garrett stood up. He didn't look angry. He looked almost bored. Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A, Garrett said, handing a sealed envelope to the bailiff, who walked it up to the bench. A comprehensive psychiatric evaluation conducted this past Friday by Dr. Eris Thorne, a court-appointed forensic psychiatrist this very jurisdiction uses regularly. Dr. Thorne concludes that my client's cognitive function is flawless. He is appropriately managing his pain medication under medical supervision, and he does not meet any criteria for guardianship. Halvorson opened the envelope, scanned the document, and raised an eyebrow. Dr. Thorne is thorough. I'll admit this. Dana Voss didn't flinch. A single evaluation doesn't erase a pattern of violent behavior, Your Honor. The police report. I was getting to the police report. Garrett interrupted smoothly. He picked up a thick, bound folder from our table. We also submit Exhibit B, a certified digital archive of my client's home server, which his wife physically stole from their residence on Friday afternoon to destroy evidence. Chloe's head snapped up. The tissue dropped from her hand. For the first time all morning, the terrified wife mask slipped, replaced by raw, unadulterated shock. She looked at Voss, panic bleeding into her eyes. Voss frowned, realizing her client hadn't told her everything. Inside that archive, Your Honor, Garrett continued, his voice projecting clearly, are hundreds of WhatsApp messages between the petitioner, Chloe, and her personal trainer, Marcus Whitfield. They detail a multi-month conspiracy to force my client to sign his personal injury settlement into an irrevocable trust, which they plan to immediately drain into a shell LLC in Dubai. My client wasn't delusional. He was entirely correct. Halvorson leaned forward, the boredom completely gone from her face. She flipped open the binder Garrett had handed up. up. The courtroom was dead silent. You could hear the rain lashing against the high windows. Miss Voss, Halvorsen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Are you aware your client was moving to establish an offshore LLC? Your Honor, this is fabricated, Voss said, though she was looking at Chloe with narrow, furious eyes. These chat logs could have been typed by anyone. It's exactly the kind of paranoid fabrication my client detailed in her affidavit. And it doesn't excuse the destruction of property. Garrett smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Exhibit C, Garrett said. He pulled out a single sheet of paper with a dealership logo printed at the top. Subpoenaed sales records from Prestige Motors, dated this past Friday at 11:15 a.m., just hours before the alleged vandalism. Chloe stopped breathing. I could see her chest freeze from 5 feet away. On Friday morning at 8:00 a.m., the petitioner illegally emptied the couple's joint checking account of $42,000, Garrett said, tapping the paper. At 11:15 a.m., she walked into Prestige Motors and used that exact amount in cash as a down payment on a 2024 BMW M4. She co-signed the loan with Marcus Whitfield. The vehicle that Marcus Whitfield claimed was vandalized on Friday night was bought for him by the petitioner, using stolen marital funds just 10 hours prior. Halvorsen stared at the dealership record. Then she looked down at the police report Voss had submitted. They bought a luxury car with stolen money, Garrett said quietly, delivering the final blow. They smashed the windows themselves, and they filed a false police report, under penalty of perjury, to frame my client and manipulate this court into freezing his non-marital assets. It is a staggering, coordinated attempt at fraud. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Dana Voss slowly placed her hands flat on the table. She didn't look at the judge. She didn't look at Garrett. She slowly turned her head and looked at Chloe. The look of utter disgust on the veteran litigator's face was something I will remember for the rest of my life. Voss had built a reputation on winning ugly, but she didn't suborn perjury, and she didn't let clients make a fool of her in front of a sitting judge. Miss Voss, Judge Halvorsen said softly. Do you want to confer with your client? Voss stood up. She picked up her expensive leather briefcase. No, Your Honor. I am formally withdrawing as counsel for the petitioner, effective immediately. Chloe grabbed Voss's sleeve. Dana, wait. You can't. Voss ripped her arm away, didn't say a word, and walked straight out of the courtroom, her heels clicking like gunshots against the tile. Chloe sat at the petitioner's table, entirely alone. The smugness, the calculation, the fake tears, it was all gone. She looked small. She looked terrified. Judge Halvorsen didn't yell. She just picked up her pen. Emergency petition for guardianship is denied with extreme prejudice, Halvorsen said, her voice cold and absolute. The temporary freeze on the respondent's separate settlement account is lifted immediately. Furthermore, I am forwarding this transcript, along with Exhibits B and C, to the District Attorney's Office with a formal recommendation to investigate the petitioner and Mr. Whitfield for perjury, insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. Halvorsen looked directly at Chloe. You have picked the wrong courtroom to play games in. We are adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp, final crack. Garrett clapped me on the shoulder, a heavy, solid weight of reassurance. We packed up our briefcases and walked out of the courtroom. I didn't look back at the petitioner's table. When we got out into the hallway, Chloe was standing by the elevators, frantically dialing her phone with shaking hands. Marcus, pick up, she hissed into the receiver, pacing in tight circles. Pick up the phone. Voss quit. The judge has the dealership records. We need to. She stopped when she saw me. The phone slowly lowered from her ear. She looked at me, really looked at me, stripped of the power and the leverage she thought she held. There was no apology in her eyes. There was only the horrifying realization that her entire life was about to burn to the ground, and I wasn't going to hand her a bucket of water. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to gloat. The silence was heavier than anything I could have shouted in that hallway. The elevator dinged. The doors opened. I stepped inside with Garrett. I pressed the button for the ground floor. As the metal doors slid shut, the last thing I saw was Chloe standing in the cold fluorescent light, entirely alone, waiting for a man who owed the ears 40 grand to pick up the phone and save her. We walked out of the courthouse and into the rain. It was freezing, but for the first time in 3 years, I took a deep breath and my chest didn't feel tight. The money was safe. My mind was mine, and the house was finally going to be quiet.